Alex Bouks, and this is my co-host Roger Sutherland with the Guitar Gear Locker, and this is our second episode of the Guitar Gear Locker with our special guest interviewee with Spencer Hazard of Full Hell, and Spencer, has been a friend of mine for quite a few years, and I'm just glad to have him on the show. An amazing guitar player, and I think he's pretty innovative, I think, in today's music scene. So welcome, Spencer.
Hey, how's it going?
Welcome to the show.
Good. Awesome. I guess we'll just start off with, the two-part question basically is, do you remember when it was that, you got that passion for music? And was there a moment when you decided like, hey, I'm going to play guitar, and this is what I want to do?
I mean, I'm probably like most, like people that are into like extreme music, or anyone that plays guitar. It's like, I heard some like punk bands when I was like 12 or 11. And I got like a cheap guitar for Christmas. I ended up like, my parents got me like a harmony guitar from Sears. It ended up being so crappy that I actually had to return it, and we had to go to the store and get like another Strat knockoff. But yeah, I mean, I would say probably started playing like when I was like 11 or 12, but it was a situation where I was like kind of got frustrated with it, so I put it away for a little while. I don't think I started like taking guitar super serious until I was probably like 16 or 17.
Oh, okay. And when was it that you started, that you formed Full of Hell?
We started when I was like 19, so that's like 2009. So we're coming up in next month is going to be 15 years.
Wow, nice.
Wow,
yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, me and Dave are the original members. Dave's our drummer. I first started talking to him when I think he was 14. Right. I had a tour booked, and I was like, we need a drummer. And I found a 14-year-old on MySpace, and I was like, do you just want to go on tour? He was like, I've never been in a band before. I've never even played a show. And I was like, that's fine.
It's funny. I was looking at something of yours, and it said MySpace. I was like, I wonder. And I clicked it, nothing.
Yeah. Definitely gone forever.
Yeah. That's awesome. Now, as far as, your style of guitar playing, and it's really hard to describe. Like for me, it's hard to say like, hey, is he a punk player? Is he a metal player? Is he avant-garde experimental player? Because there's a lot of interesting things that you do as a player, and I'm just curious, like, was there any guitar players that inspired you? Because like I said, you're a really diverse player. This is a lot of interesting things going on.
I think it's more like less individuals and more of just like, I like the style of a band, because it's like I even take influence on how I play and how I write songs from like listening to drummers and bass players too. There's never been like a situation where it's like I idolize or worship like a guitar player. That's just never been my thing for some reason. There's no like thing behind it. Is just, that's just how I've been. But it's like I like all different types of music, so why not try to take my love for a band like Dinosaur Jr. and combine it with a band like Morbid Angel? Like they might be on the opposite ends of the spectrum on like music, but they meet somewhere in the middle because both bands are doing something interesting with a guitar.
Definitely. Who were your influences growing up?
I mean, growing up, it was like my favorite bands were like the Ramones and like Misfits and stuff like that. Right. So that's like what made me want to start playing music. But as I've gotten older, and that's like another thing from like being into punk, I've always been like, I don't need to learn certain things on guitar, and it's kind of stifled me a little bit, but it's also to cause me to be more creative, because I don't necessarily know a lot about the guitar, but I'm like, with my minimal knowledge of like theory or anything, I'm like, well, this shape of chord sounds cool. This like style of like a scale or something, it might not be traditional, but it sounds good to me.
Right.
Yeah, and it's the same for me too. It's just I never took lessons or anything like that, and I think some of the most interesting guitar players are the ones that just kind of found their own voice, and I see that in you that you're not copying anybody, you're just being yourself, and yeah, I think that's the most important thing, is just to have some identity, which you have,
Yeah, thanks.
And
you know,
sometimes the lessons can kind of stifle you too. I know when I took them when I was a kid, man, you can only play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star so much out of that Hal Leonard book.
Yeah.
I started it again as an adult learner. It was much better, but sometimes you just have to bang it out.
Well, that's the like I took lessons for a couple years, and I just like I didn't look like you said you did like you can only learn the same stuff so many times. It's like I learned all the like traditional like standard cowboy chords you learn as a kid, and it's like I learned the pentatonic and like the major scale, but like it was an issue where I was just like, yeah, I might not pick up something right away, and instead of like trying to like the lessons like trying to like teach me like try to like accentuate like my strengths, they were just like, well, no, you didn't get this right away, so we're just going to do it 3 or 4 lessons in a row. And it's like I feel like you don't actually learn that way. It's like,
Right.
okay, we'll try something else and then come back to that, and instead it's just like this feels like a waste of time and money to be, it's supposed to be a fun activity. Why is it making it feel like homework?
Right. I think looking
yeah,
back, man, if you want to destroy a kid and guitar playing, give them high action on a cheap guitar, or just high action on any guitar, and a bad guitar teacher,
Yeah.
like going out of a book, and they're done. I found skateboards and BMX bikes after that.
Yeah, and that's like after those couple of lessons, I was just like, I don't like, I'll just figure out stuff on my own. I like, and that's another thing with my playing. It's like, I maybe when I was younger learned a couple like Metallica riffs. So that's like, oh, I got my scales from that. But besides that, it's like, I've never been a guitar player to sit down and like try to learn someone else's songs. I'd rather
Right.
come up with riffs of my own idea.
Right.
now as far as like um, you know as a musician, as a player, you guys do a lot of collaborations with a lot of different people.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's hard for me to keep track. It's like, like Ross or something will be like, "Hey, did you see the new Full of Hell?" And I'm like, "No, they just put something out. Holy shit, they got another thing out." And so, where I'm getting at is you guys play with a lot of different types of players, different musicians too, more on the like avant-garde, experimental uh, people. And do you feel that shapes you more as a musician? Because for me, playing with different people from different types of music and stuff is shaped me as a player over the years, and it's just opened up a whole other world for me.
Yeah.
Do you find that happening to you?
I think like compared, like you said, every collaboration we've done is something different. So say when we collaborate with someone like The Body, it's like they're less guitar focused and it's more of like using the studio as an instrument. So that's like doing those records have taught me like to use my surroundings more than necessarily like being like, oh, we need to write this part, and this part. It's like let it flow, and we can use the studio as like an editing tool to make the songs. And I think that's been very beneficial to how we've like progressed as a band in the most recent years. And like even doing a record with we just did a record with this band called Nothing, who's a shoegaze band. It's like completely opposite end of the spectrum of what Full of Hell is. But that has taught me like with songwriting, it's like you don't need to be flashy. It's more important to come up with parts that actually serve the song than to like stand out. And like that's my favorite part of collaborating, is just being like able to work together with new people to come up with something that like we all serve each other instead of one person trying to outdo the other person. I think that's like made it very helpful for me as just a well-rounded guitar player.
Wow.
And as far as, you know, your equipment, you know, and the gear that you use, like there's a lot going on there. It's like, you know, I remember being on tour with you and I to see all these gadgets and I just like, what the hell is going on over there? You know?
Can I just confess what I started looking at stuff, and it wasn't when you did an interview and you said I play a Fender, and I was like, what? I called Alex. I was like, you play? I could. It blew my mind. The noises and the sounds you're getting out of a Fender.
Yeah.
It just wasn't what I guess I stereotyped it. It wasn't what I was expecting,
I
but
mean,
it's awesome.
that like a big influence on my playing, even since we started, Full of Hell has been like Sonic Youth, and they've always used like Fender guitars and stuff. But I'm like, you know, I've gone through my phases of playing like BC Riches and more metal guitars. But it's like, I think the third guitar I had in Full of Hell was a Jaguar, and I ended up getting rid of that, and then like I said, switching around and playing more like metal type guitars. But I ended up coming back to Fender, and it's just like when we tour, people are always so blown back, being like, why are you guys playing like Jazz Masters? Like we would think you'd be playing these like shred guitars, but it's like, no, I think you can do a lot more interesting stuff with a guitar that's not necessarily for the genre of music that it's built for. Like, yeah, we do modifications to it. Like I change the pickups a lot of the time depending on the model, but like a lot of the time I keep the stuff stock, and I try to like bend my writing and playing around to like how the guitar sounds.
It's working. It sounds awesome.
So what is your basic setup, you know, that you have? Because I know you're using the orange amps. You know,
Yeah.
you use the
Still, like, I've been playing orange amps, I think, since 2012. Another situation where it's like I went through a bunch of different stuff, like more traditional, like Marshall and like Mesa, like stuff that you would think would be more suited for grind and death metal and stuff. But I just ended up being like drawn to the way that oranges look. But it's just something with the tone. Like I love the like classic heavy, super like low end sound of an orange or a mad amp or something. I think that actually makes our tone stick out a lot more than like say some of our contemporaries.
Yeah,
And as far
I
as
definitely.
what are you using as far as like I know you have a lot of different stuff going on.
I mean, for most tours, I use an orange TH100, which is like they've discontinued it, but it's like they're more steamed line metal sounding amp, but you can still get a lot of low end from it. Or if that, like, if I don't want to bring that amp, because since they're kind of getting rare now, I use a Rocker Verb 100, which is their more like flagship amp, and that's more like it's more classic voice, but you can still get like a lot of the low end out of it. But like you said, like I use a bunch of different stuff now. It's like I started collecting some of the Mad Amp stuff, like because everybody for ever since I was in high school, I wanted like green amps or Mad Amps, and everyone was like charging double of what they got them for. But if you just direct order from the website, they're like as much as an amp would be in the US, and it's free shipping. So it's like I found that loophole. Instead of paying like $3,500 for an amp I want, it's like, oh, if you order direct from them, it's like $1,800. You just have to eat.
Nice.
Yeah. But I mean, and then too, with us touring, like, you know, with Immolation, you've seen that we use a ton of different pedals and stuff. And it's like I can't even go through, like there's a couple delays and distortions that I can't like live without, but like a lot of it is more of just like fill space than to actually like affect our guitars. It's more of just like little like colors that we put on the riffs instead of just like being like, oh, we need this pedal for this part.
Mhm.
Wow.
Rogers is actually an orange guy.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm a pickup winder, and my main amp out here is an orange. It's just an OR15, but everybody that comes by and plugs their guitar into that guitar, they're like, "Wow, what is this?" I'm like, "It's just an OR15 you can buy at the store, nothing special."
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, they can get crystal clear and so chimey and then so raunchy dirty. And unlike you, I at first I hated the orange. I hated the color, but now I love it.
Yeah.
It's so nostalgic looking.
Yeah. I mean, I like, you go back and see like all the videos of like bands playing them from the 60s, and it's just
Yeah.
like so striking. And it's
Yeah.
like, I feel like they're still like striking, especially too for like playing playing and touring with death metal bands. You always see everybody using the typical Mesa, whatever.
Sure.
It's like you
Yeah.
see the orange on stage and you're like, I wonder what that's going to sound like.
Yeah, yeah. Man, I absolutely dig the originality that you have, and the music and in the gear that I mean, we could get all kinds of nerdy with the gear. What kind of pickups do you like?
I honestly, so I like the cheaper Seymour Duncan pickups. Like I
Yeah,
like Duncan JBs, just like, the $65, 70 Duncan JBs.
yeah.
But I found out I accidentally ordered a Duncan JB for Floyd Rose spacing. I didn't
Okay.
realize there was Floyd Rose spacing on it, and I put it in my
Right,
one Jazzmaster. But I noticed that it's like a slight bit hotter than a
right,
standard JB, and
right,
that's all I've gone to now. Is just like the Floyd spacing. It's not perfect underneath the strings, but
right.
something with it just makes everything so much tighter sounding.
Yeah. And sometimes that's where the magic happens is where you can take like a standard PAF with a 49.2 spacing and throw it on a Floyd and you just get a different sound out of it. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, and like I love doing the thing. I forget, there was some band I was watching their rig rundown, and they talked about like how they only play one pickup guitars because of like they have the theory that the neck pickup like sucks some of the sound out because it's like an
Yeah.
extra magnet. So not every one of my guitars, but a few of my guitars, I've just gutted the insides completely except for the bridge.
Yeah.
And it's almost like with like a Jaguar or a Jazzmaster, there's so much extra space for the electronics. But when
Right.
you gut everything out of it, it makes it almost sound like a hollow body guitar at
Right.
that point.
Right.
Like I have a Kurt Cobain signature Jaguar, and it had like a ton of extra knobs and stuff, but it was like to his spec, so I just hated playing it. But once I like gutted everything out, one pickup, one volume knob, and just had
Mhm.
like all the cavity just wide open, it's just like
Right.
it made it one of my best sounding guitars that I own.
Yeah. I mean, not to sound like a super stalker, but I think I saw that. The guitar had like no knobs in it, no front,
Yeah,
no bridge pick or neck pickup in it. It just looked gnarly, which is cool.
yeah,
Whenever you see, I love guys that just have original looking guitars come through my shop. Like
yeah,
it's personalized and just funky.
yeah. And it's I like before before the pandemic, I was playing aluminum guitars as well.
Mhm.
And
Ah,
we ended up in 2019 having our entire van with all of our equipment stolen.
Ooh,
And one of the best guitars I've ever owned was in the theft. It was like this guy that records us sometimes in Baltimore called Developing Nation Studios. He made it for me. And he's made me a couple other ones, but the one that got stolen was just something special. And then
mhm.
from taking the years off of not touring, it's like I can only use the aluminum neck stuff for studio because it's like those couple years off like completely wore out the muscle in my neck, so I can't play heavy guitars at all anymore.
Wow. Did it have a little bit of neck dive to it?
he's like surprisingly compared to like say like a Travis Bean or something, he was able to like figure out like the perfect counterbalance.
Oh,
Like
wow.
the first couple, like I have two that are like well, the one that got stolen was like based on a Gibson Marauder.
Mm-hmm.
So like kind of like a Les Paul shape. And then he did the replacement for that is based on some sort of weird 80s Les Paul Jr. It was like a shred Les Paul Jr. they made for a year. And that one is like, that one doesn't dive at all. But I also have one for we play in E flat as well. I have one tuned to E flat, which is based on the Gibson Corvus, which is like considered one of the ugliest guitar designs ever made. That one has a lot of neck dive because it's more neck than there is body.
Right.
Yeah. When you're in the studio, do you like to use different guitars for different sounds and things like that? Like, will you go in like with 4 or 5 different guitars?
I mean, I think the last, like, we are still sitting on a couple different recording sessions for records that we're still waiting to put out. I think the last session we did, I brought like 7 guitars to that. It was like a couple different single coil guitars, a couple different like my live guitars, a couple guitars. I'm like, I don't want to take this on the road because I don't want anything to happen to this. But even when we did that record with the band Nothing, I bought a couple Gretsch guitars because I was like, this record's going to sound different. We should get some really like out there sounding stuff for like metal. The one, I think it was a Duojet. I didn't really click with it, but the hollow body, I forget the model because it's like some long dumb number name, not like a real guitar. That one is like I take to the studio all the time now. It's just like hollow body with a Bigsby. Absolutely hate the Bigsby, but it does give you a different sound.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that metal there.
Yeah.
Whatever it's made, you know.
Yeah.
And as far as pickups, I know you were saying about Seymour Duncan's. I remember you pretty sure you were using like the lace sensor pickups. Am I right? Or that was a while ago though.
Yeah, that was a few years ago. It ended up like my issue with it was every pickup sounded too different from the next pickup. So it was like I would try to load my guitars, say like for the road being like, I want to like kind of semi-identical guitars. I put the same pickups in it and it would just like, they would sound completely different. And it's like, I know there's a little bit of difference. Like all my guitars, like, you know, for the most part, even if I do put similar pickups, there's a tiny bit difference, but it was like such a wide margin. I was like, this is like I need something that I can actually depend on.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have anything with P90s in it?
I think I have. My parents actually got me an SG they found at a yard sale. I forget what the exact model is, but it's one from the like mid 70s. They found it at a yard sale for like pretty cheap. And they were just like, oh, we got this to like resell, but if you want it, you can just have it. Like we didn't pay any money for it. And I think it had like the mini P90s in it.
Nice.
But like that's the guitar. I always bring it to the studio, but it like never ends up getting used. It sounds really good, but I also think the issue is it's like those pickups are so specific sounding. It's like when we start playing fast stuff, it's like they can't keep up. It just gets like lost.
It just sounds like a blob of sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah, that's something I stumbled on P90s about 3 years ago. Started whining them, and I don't know why I didn't discover them earlier. And I do some weird things. I like to see what kind of you can get all kinds of nerdy. There's a lot of really good pickup winders out there. I just like to throw wire, get a good number of wire or a good amount of wire on there, see how it sounds and go with it. And stumbled on those and I was like, yeah, that sounds great. Every time I wind a set, they go as soon as I get them done.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I play a lot of like I play a lot of jazz masters and I don't change the pickups in all of them. So it's like, but sometimes it's just like, I guess depending on the room, the jazz master pickups are like so shrill, but some they just will sound so good too. So it's like I have guitars where I'm like, I wish I could take this guitar on tour, but I know it's going to sound different in every single room. It's either going to sound too muddy or just like squeal beyond control. So it's like, you know.
Yeah. I can see that about the P90s. I love P90s. I love the sound of those pickups, but you know, I couldn't do that with playing an immolation, playing super fast.
Yeah.
With a P90. You know, I don't think it would work. You know, who could? Who knows? You know, but
yeah. I mean, that's like one thing too. It's like with doing so much studio work, it's like it's an excuse to buy different guitars where you're like, I would never play this live, but even if I use it on one or two riffs, it's going to be worth it.
Yeah. Or a certain part or something like that, you know, in the studio, you know, something slow and open or something like that. You know?
Yeah. I mean, I even bought a Fender 12 string a couple years ago. And I mean, I like writing. I bought it to be like, let me try to write songs on it. It's like, you can actually play pretty fast on a 12 string, surprisingly. Like everybody complains about it, but as long as you have it set up well, like I've come up with a bunch of different like fast, like more death metal sounding riffs on a 12 string, but it's just like I don't want to take it on the road because it's like I don't have time to change 12 strings before a set. Like
and tune it, you know.
But now it's become a guitar. It's like anytime I want to do overdubs or like, you know, undertones for like a riff, I have this 12 string. It's just like I can put it underneath the riff or over top of it and just makes it a completely different characteristic that you wouldn't hear in anything else.
Right. What's your next guitar you have your eye on?
So it's right now it's actually being set up. I went to Atomic Music in DC for the first time ever the other day.
Wow.
Like I'd never been, and I was like, did not plan on buying anything, but I was like, I know I'm going to go in here and end up buying something. But there was I got a Japanese jazz master from the 80s that was just like shoved in a corner, and even the guy on the floor was like, oh, I didn't even know we had that. He was like, yeah, just ask the guy, just talk to the guy at the counter, and he'll probably give you a discount on it because none of us know that it's here. So now that's being set up for me, a white made in Japan, like jazz master. I think I looked up the serial number. It's either from like 86 or 88.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah.
What are you having them do to it?
Just tuning it to like C standard.
Yeah.
Because like I said, Full of Hell plays in C and E flat, but with the Jazz Masters being like longer scale, it like sounds way better in C than it does in E. Right.
Oh, that's cool. You can always ask a guitar guy what his next guitar is. He'll always have it.
Yeah.
And it's funny. He messaged me as I don't know, maybe like a week or two ago, and you were like, "Hey." He knows what I likes, and he sends me this ESP. It was like the junior you were talking about, Roger. You're like, oh, it looks like a junior, you know? And he's just like, oh, you see this? I'm like, yeah, I already got my eye on it. You know, but do you you know, is it like an evolution as far as you know your tuning, like with Full of Hell? Like you said that you guys are like in D and C. Now, did that change over time as far as like the experimental tunings, you know, with having different tunings?
So it was like for years, I would say up until 2018, we just only did anything in C standard. It was just like a situation. It was like I had a guitar that was dropped lower, like tuned way lower, but I was like, let me like tune it up. And we ended up just sticking with C. And then I was playing music with a couple other guys. Like we were trying to do some like different sounding band, but it didn't end up working out. So I was like, I have like this guitar in E flat. It's like, I might as well try to write some newer stuff with Full Hell in a different tuning. And it's like now will like, and it's also cool too because it's like now I have an excuse to bring like double the amount of guitars on tour. Like, yeah, it's annoying, but it's also too cool to be like, oh, you know, instead of 2 guitars, I can bring 4 or 5 guitars.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it's like with the different, like the more like classic traditional like rock tuning, it's like I end up writing way different sounding stuff than the C standard tuning.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
use
Absolutely.
different gauges of strings when you go from E flat to C?
Yeah. I always use Ernie Ball stuff, but E flat is just regular slinky, and then the C standard is burly slinky. I forget what the number is,
Right.
like 46 to 11. It's like thick, but it's not too thick. Like I can still bend and I
Right.
don't kill my hands.
Right. It's not like extension cords like Alex plays with.
Yeah. At one point I was doing, but it was just like I don't have issues with my fretting hand. It's like my picking hand, I'll get like my thumb will get locked up. So that's why I like had to go to lower strings.
Right.
As far as like writing, when you guys are writing songs, you know, because I know Dylan does a lot of like effects and stuff like that, like, you know, live. Sometimes do you find that maybe he comes up with something, or Dave or Sam comes up with like some kind of electronic sound, and you maybe write guitar parts around that?
It's mainly me just like writing riffs, and then I'm like, because that's like a thing too. It's like I don't want there to be effects or noise just for the sake of it. Like it needs
Mhm.
to fit in the song, because if not, it's going to become too distracting and become, I think, gimmicky. So like I'll write a part, and then once we get in the studio, I'll like record it and listen to it and be like, okay, this part may seem a little barren. So it's either we have Dylan do like a sample or electronics, or we just do another overdub with a different sounding guitar. So
Mhm.
it's never like someone comes with like you said, like maybe like, oh, Sam has like a saxophone part that I write a guitar around. It's more of like I always just come up with riffs. I mean, if you see our group chats, it's like for the most part, it's me just being like, here's a new riff idea, here's a new chord sequence idea. Like, and it's just, I probably send like 2 or 3 a week to the group chat. And they might never be used, but I still want them to hear it. So
Mhm.
eventually down the road, we can be like, oh, what about that riff?
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes you know, like for myself, I may write something, and then you know, you don't think much of it, and then somebody's like, "Hey, that's great. That thing you came up with, you know, we could use that with this," you know. And sometimes you forget about things, and that's why it's good to have, you know, a stockpile of ideas, like you said. Like I'll just keep sending stuff, and you
Yeah.
know, see if it sticks. You know.
Yeah. Cause even if it sucks, I'm still just like, I don't know how I feel about this. What do you guys think? And half the time they're like, oh, that's like awesome. And I'm like, I don't know. And then we come back to it and turn it into a song.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, when you all, this is for kind of both of you, I guess. I mean, the audience should be all types of people out there with all different kinds of knowledges, and a lot of us just don't know. Like, when you all are writing, is there a person or a duo, or does the whole band kind of like, I have this riff, and then you put them all together? How is that? How's that process go?
Well, like with Full of Hell, it's mainly I will come up with a riff or a full song, and I'll bring it to our drummer because he lives right down the street from me.
Right.
So me and him will jam it out. Like I'll send the riff to the group first where it's just guitar. And
Mhm.
then say if I get with our drummer, it might completely become a different beast. It might have been in my intention to be like, oh, this should be a fast song. But then once we
Mhm.
start jamming, I'm like, actually like try to groove it a little more. And then it becomes
Mhm.
like a slow song or a mid-tempo song, or like,
Right.
you know, we just figure out different time signatures or whatever. So it's like it's mainly just like I said, it's just me and this one other guy, and then we show it to everyone else and like, here's what we came up with, like
Right.
kind of got ideas for everyone, or being like, this is like the vibe I want, come up with a riff like similar to that.
Mhm. Well, how often, How often does it I mean, you just come up with something and everybody in the band is kinda like, "Man, where'd you come up with that?" Like, I mean, it just doesn't come off well?
I mean, sometimes, I mean, even sometimes I'm like, I don't know how I came up with this. Like,
Right.
I guess we gotta figure it out some way. Like,
Right.
I mean, like, especially too, because it's like I'm I got to a point in writing where I'm like, oh, I it needs to be really technical sounding, and I've tried to kind of like gone back and looked at our previous stuff and been like, it was kind of dumb for me to write this way because now it's like, yeah, we can play it live, but it's going to be a pain in the ass to play it
Oh,
live. So,
yeah.
like kind of reel myself in, but now it's gotten to the point where it's like, yeah, the riff might sound easy, but the way it sits on top of the drums, it's like, oh, great, this riff is in 7/4 when I thought it was going
Right.
to be in 4/4.
Right, right. That's interesting. See, that's a perspective I never would have dreamt of. And
Do
I
you guys
guess
ever
y'all
like Yeah. Do you guys ever like jam? Like, because it sounds like, sometimes when you guys play live, like it sounds like you guys are like certain parts like improv, and do the four of you guys ever get together and just like write stuff where you guys are just jamming and, just going for it or whatever, just coming up with an idea and just jam for like 40 minutes on one thing?
I mean, mainly it'll be like usually I'll bring a riff to Dave, our drummer, and I'm like, all right, play this, play this over this, and we'll do it. And I'm like, all right, that's all I have for right now. Let's try to like, what do you think should be next? It's never like we never just get in there and like try to improvise. It's more of like we kind of sit down and like, what do you think should be next? Like, should it be this style riff or should it be this style riff? Should it be like a kind of coarse sounding thing? Like, yeah, like with the live stuff, that just became like there's like a couple different bands that were influenced that's more like I would like avant-garde. I mean, look at a band like we've discussed it on tour before. Like, look at a band like Swans. Like, they'll play one
Hmm.
song for like an hour and a half, just jamming
Yeah.
it. And it's like we've always taken inspiration from like that type of stuff of being like, all right, how about in the middle of this song, we like devolve and make it more like jazz sounding, just jam it out kind of thing for like however long we want to, and then like try to get back into it as clean as possible. It's like that's more of like a thing that we like discuss before like a tour, but we never like there's never writing sessions like that really.
Yeah. I think that'd be interesting because I could see you guys doing something like that. Just a recording of like kind of like a 40-minute song of,
Yeah, I mean,
experiment.
it could be cool, but it also could be like, all right, this is kind of getting annoying.
Yeah, it sounds cool, the 3 of us. We don't know
Yeah,
how it'll go. Everything sounds cool with 3 guys in a room, right?
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I mean, it depends on the room too, because it could even sound like crap depending on the room.
True,
yeah,
true.
yeah, yeah.
Would,
Yeah, I could definitely see something like that. That would be cool. But just the
what do
thought.
you all have coming up? I know you all are playing a Fillmore here locally here pretty soon, right? In the spring.
Yeah, we got a tour with Dying Fetus in the spring. Uh, we have a few different recordings that we're like finishing up right now. And then, yeah, I mean, we're taking a little break from going to Europe, but we're kind of figuring out some like other overseas stuff at the moment, like places we've not been in like almost a decade. So I can't spoil it right now,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's being worked on at least.
Good deal.
Nice. Um, is there anything that is there any goals that you have as far as musically, like you feel like you're still trying to get to that place, because if you guys been around 15 years now, you guys got a lot of records out.
Mhm.
But is there any kind of like, like do you feel like you're still searching, you're still trying to get to this point as a writer?
I mean, my thing is, and I think it's like with every musician, I mean, I can't speak for every musician, but I would assume most of us think the same. It's more of like, I don't want to get to a point where it feels like I'm stagnating. So it's like I keep like pushing myself to do stuff. It's never me personally being like, oh, I didn't do this on this record, or I didn't do this, like it wasn't flashy enough. It's more of along the lines of being like, man, I can't feel like I'm not doing something with music. Like I can't feel like, oh, I'm just sitting at home. Like the at least with like when COVID was happening, like we weren't able to tour, but we were like, why don't we like just write a bunch of music? Why don't we start a bunch of side bands? Why don't we like, you know, we did like a live session and we did some like reissues and like remasters and stuff. So it's like, as long as we're doing something, I'm content. As soon as it's like, I'm sure like you feel this way after a tour, it's like, it's nice to be home the first day. And then 3 days later, you're like, all right, man, I need to get playing again.
Yeah. I don't even want to see the guitar for a couple of days, but then I'm just like, pick it up. And then I feel inspired to write because I'm away from the road and all the insanity of that, you know?
Yeah. It's just like, you know how it is. It's like, it's nice being like seeing the family again, but then you're like, man, I'm kind of bored.
Yeah.
Are you having fun though?
What was that?
Are you having fun?
Yeah, I still have fun. I mean, now getting older, like it's a lot different touring when I was 19 compared to being like almost 35 and being like, all right, it's a lot more aches and pains and worrying about like making sure the bills are paid while I'm on the road.
Well, I'll help you out. I'll look into the future for it. It gets way easier when you're 56. Trust me.
I don't know. We'll see.
That was a lie. Before you got on, I was talking about my shoulder hurting and what?
We're both talking about our aches and pains, our arms falling off, and you know all my Spencer.
I mean, you don't think about it when you're like a teenager, being like, yeah, my back's gonna be fine driving for like 10 hours a day every single day.
Yeah. You know, when you get on stage, you kind of forget about that. You know, it's like that adrenaline is over, and then you know all the stuff in between is can be a downer. You know, but once you get on stage, you're just like, okay, this is why I'm here. You know.
Yeah, I mean that's like my favorite part of touring is playing. I don't like any other aspect of it. I can take it or leave it, but as long as I get to play and as long as people are like excited and still into it, like that's all that matters.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you see, I know we've talked about we'll go back in the nerd area for a minute. We've talked about like the pedals and the gear and the amps. Do you ever, I guess this is going to be my question every week, Alex, do you ever see yourself go on to any of the modeling, like the Axe effects or any of that kind of stuff?
No, and that's simply because like I'm like bad enough trying to figure out stuff on like a standard computer or like setting up a new TV. Like I can't imagine if there is some issue being on the road on the fly, like me trying to figure out how to like reprogram something. That just sounds like a nightmare. I mean, it's bad enough when you're on tour and an amp explodes and like at least you can go to like a local store or Guitar Center and pick up something right there. Like if something like that goes down, like I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
Right. It's funny. It reminds me, I know a local guitar teacher, a good friend of mine, and if he's watching this, he'll know exactly what I'm talking about. He said he has one student that's an older guy, and he's like, I just want to take that guitar and plug it into that amp and make a noise. He don't want to do anything else. No programming, no nothing.
Yeah. I mean, it just like, and I mean too, it's like with any technology, it's like it's constantly changing. So who's to say like one thing you have 2 years ago is completely obsolete 3 years from now?
Yep.
Yeah. True. Yeah. I'm still the same. I'm the same way. Straight into a tube amp and a couple pedals, and that's it. That's all I need. You know.
and two, like, yeah, that works. And like, there's even some like bands like, you know, they are able to like use it tastefully and blend it with like an amp or stuff. But it's like, I've also seen it too, where it's like, they're just DI box in. Yeah, it sounds good up front, but as soon as you like go to the side or anywhere else, it's just like, you just hear the strings plunking. You don't actually hear the amps.
Well, and
Yeah.
I think at some point and companies will probably hate to hear me say this, but you know, it almost like if you can make a single coil Strat sound like Eruption on an Eruption setting, then I mean there has to be a little fakeness to it, maybe, I guess you would say. And me, like when I'm winding a pickup, I can't hear how that pickup is going to actually sound unless I play it through a tube amp. You know,
Yeah.
because I can put it through the fractal and it's going to sound like anything I tell it to say. I hit a preset for Ozzy Osbourne or Randy Rhoads and Crazy Train. It's going to sound like Crazy Train.
Well, that's another thing too. And it's like, I'm sure Alex can relate. It's like, yeah, we've gotten to the point in our bands where it's like, you know, we're playing nicer stages and stuff like that. But it's also too like, you get in these weird, you get to some place and you're like, I can't hear myself at all. But at least with a tube amp, you can still kind of play to feel. Like you can still feel the amp under your feet and still be able to like control it compared to like, unless you have like in-ears or something like that, like you're just like completely losing that feel. And it's like once you're lost, you're kind of lost, you know. So it's like that's a big thing with me too. It's like I need to feel the sound, not just hear it. I need to feel it.
Right. Yeah, don't get me wrong. I as somebody that watches concerts, especially local bands, I mean there's a place for those like smaller venues. I can tell you, I like having a discussion with my wife and friends while you're listening to a band sometimes, you know, if you're having dinner or whatever. So there's a place for it.
Yeah.
Maybe not where you all are playing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even going back to like when like I was not playing with Full Hell, I was playing with like one of my other side bands this weekend. And we went to a big music store, not Atomic, a different big music store outside of DC. And the other guitar player who just started playing with Full Hell, he plays bass in this other band, but he still like likes to check out guitar stuff. He was like, "Can I try out this amp?" And the guy that was working the floor was like, "Why?" He was like, this isn't like, it's too heavy. Why would you ever need something like this?" And it's like some people like that. And then we hear him talking to a guy around the other aisle, like trying a fractal, like, or, you know, one of the digital things and being like, yeah, why do you need a big amp? It's not like you guys are playing Madison Square Garden. It's like, I hate that aspect. It's always like, there's people don't realize that it's like, there are musicians that live in a certain spectrum that are playing. Yeah, we might not be playing dive bars, but it's like, I hate the mindset of like someone underselling you because you're like, why? You're never going to be playing in a stadium. Why do you need this? And it's like, maybe because I like the way it sounds. Maybe I want it.
Right. Yeah. People just want what they want, right?
Yeah.
You know, speaking of the guitar player you just mentioned, I forgot to ask you about that. How did that come about with you guys getting? Because you've always been the guitar player in the band.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? Getting a second guitarist?
So like, I mean, we've been, like I said, we've been touring nonstop since I was like 19 years old. It's like we've been around the world multiple times at this point, and it got to the point where I was like, I need to take a break personally from doing some of like the flying and dealing with airports and like all of that. So it just became too much. So me and, like I said, I have known him since he like grew up down the street from me. Like, I think he's Sam, our bass player's age, who also grew up down the street from me. Like, I'm probably like 7 or 8 years older than both of those guys. But, yeah, I started, like, I've just known him from the neighborhood, and we like ended up jamming on this. We have a band called Reaper's Gong, which is just like a punk band. And when I was like, hey, I need to take a break from doing overseas stuff, like, do you want to fill in for me? He was like the first person I thought of, because he will fill in and play like bass for HR from the Bad Brains. Like we'll do a reggae set with him, like on the fly. Like he would get called up being like, "Hey, can you do session work tonight?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure." And he'll just like come in and learn all the HR reggae stuff. Like in the moment, I was like, you're the guy that I want you to fill in for me. And eventually got to the point where I was just like, you know, I like, we've been a band long enough. Like, I want to start expanding our sound. Like, we might as well just add a second guitar player. And it's like, this guy already knows most of our back catalog. It's like, why wouldn't we ask him to join as a second guitar? Like, he's smart enough to figure out stuff to like play with me or like counterpoints to me. So it's like, it just worked out. Like, he's a very good musician. Like, and he actually knows like theory and stuff like that. So.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I was curious about that, so I never knew what the deal was with the second guitar player.
Yeah, it just like I said, it got to the point where I was just like, those guys were on tour in Europe with him, and I was like, do you think we should just ask him to join full time instead of filling in? And we're like, yeah, sure. So while you're on the road, they were like, hey, do you want to be a full time member? And he was like, very excited.
What
I mean, what was that?
What was that like with a second guitar player? Like, like, is it easy transition when you got two guitar players playing? Because all these years you need one guitarist in the band.
It's easy too, because he understands like subtlety. He understands what serves the song. Like, yeah, he might be like a super talented guitar player, but that's like, anyone can be a talented guitar player and not know how to play with a band. He actually knows how to play with a band and like not be flashy when it needs to be, not like try to undermine me, not try to like step on our toes. Like, that's why like people have asked me too, or being like, oh, it's so cool that you got this guy, like this local guy, like you guys have done enough that you could just like have hit up a session musician or somebody. And I'm like, why would I do that? Like, I mean, I don't consider us important or anything. Why wouldn't I ask this like local kid that I've seen grow up play second guitar? I mean, it's more fun.
Yeah.
It's more fun to like sit there and try to like mold somebody than try to work with someone that has a preconceived notion.
Wow.
That's awesome. You kept it in the family, and because sometimes you get an outsider, it just doesn't work. It's like you don't know what the person's about. So
yeah,
nice.
It's like I said, people have like it's like people have preconceived notions, seeing that our bands like travel the world and don't understand like how much hard work it is. They're just like, oh yeah, you're traveling the world, you must be a billionaire at this point. And it's like, no, you got to like roll with the punches.
Right. Well, and I agree. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about band stuff or my former career, whatever. You can get the most talented person out there. If it's not a good fit, a good match, they can absolutely upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
And
that's like,
I think personalities sometimes comes before skill.
Yeah, that's what we always say. It's like, even when we're like working with a sound person or a merch person or something, they're like, the first question is like, can they actually hang? Are they going to like be a pain to be on the road with? Or are they going to be like cool and be like, all right, I understand that like being in a band most of the time is very boring. It's mainly just sitting around for 12 hours a day and then playing for an hour, if that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. True.
So for guys, I got to see Alex and the guys a little bit in Richmond. So what is a typical day on tour?
You wake up at like, you figure out the day before, like from the tour book or whatever, like, okay, this is the long of the drive. Like I always make sure that we try to get to the venue at least an hour before actual sound check. It's like, yeah, the show might not be for another 5 hours, but it's like, I would rather be bored sitting in front of the venue than be rushing to a show late and feeling anxious. So most of the time it's like sitting in the van for 5 to 10 hours a day, getting to the venue, setting up, bringing all your stuff in. If you're like headlining, setting up so you can sound check, set up everything for like an hour, then just sit backstage from like 5 o'clock until you're set around 10 o'clock. So it's mainly sitting around. And then depending on the next drive, it's like, all right, let's load up as quick as we can so we can drive like 2 hours and at least try to get 5 hours of sleep.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds like about as real as you could probably describe it.
Yeah.
Not that I would know, but it was an educational experience for me just listening.
Yeah, it's mainly sitting and going. That's it.
Right. Sitting and going.
You find yourself like for me, I come home and okay, 2 o'clock sound check, and I'm just like, because you get this so used to that routine every day,
Yeah, either that, it's like, the first couple days I'm just like completely wiped out. Like I need to like, sleep for days. But then it's like, yeah, you're right. It's like you wake up and you're like, 2 o'clock, you're like, man, I should be loading in right now. I should be whatever.
Yeah, totally.
I don't think that, when I until I started talking to a lot of people in band, and of course, Alex, you don't realize how much hard work goes into it,
Yeah.
I mean, you just know what you think in your head it is, and it's all like, oh, they just show up and they're rock stars and they play, and you don't think of anything else. That's all it is what we see.
And I mean, too, it's like, not only is it like a lot of physical hard work, it's like a lot of mental hard work, because it's like, yeah, you got to like not go crazy just sitting in one spot for 8 hours a day.
Right.
Yeah, very true.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I guess, Roger, if you don't have anything to add, I was going to ask you, about the tour coming up with Dying Fetus, when that starts, and who all the bands are on the tour.
It starts in end of April and goes to mid-May. We're not able to do like the last week of the tour just because Dylan, our singer, like he has to get back home to his like wife and kid. But it's Dying Fetus, and then Full of Hell's Direct Support, and then 200 Stab Wounds, which is like a brutal death metal band from Ohio. But we've known all of those kids since they were like 13 years old, coming to Full of Hell shows when they were little kids. And then the opening band is this band from Japan called Cruelty.
Okay, cool. Sounds like a pretty stacked lineup. I think it's going to be a really good tour.
Should be awesome. Like, yeah.
Cool, man. Roger, you got anything else to add, or?
No, man, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was great meeting you, great talking with you tonight.
Yeah, you as well.
Yeah, it was a good learning experience too.
Cool.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, awesome, man. Yeah, well, thank you. Thanks for coming on the show, Spencer. And it was a blast talking with you. And hopefully we do some touring again soon, so me, you, and Dylan can sit up and have our late night discussions.
Yeah, late night
3 hour
story time.
Wait, what's that all about?
I mean, we just like hearing about the good old days,
It's the younger man's.
Yeah. So.
That's funny.
All right, cool guys. Well, thanks for having me.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Spencer. All right, man.
Later.
Have a good night.
Take care.
Yep. Cool.